Have you ever tasted a cookie that combines the crisp sweetness of sugar cookies with the refreshing kick of peppermint and a luscious chocolate dip? These chocolate-dipped peppermint cutout sugar cookies are the holiday treat you didn't know you needed. Let's dive in. I start with 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. To keep the cookies light and tender, I recommend sifting the flour. You can use a simple hand whisk to blend the flour, or if you want to go the extra mile, sift everything through a sifter for an ultra smooth texture. Next, I add 1/2 teaspoon of salt to the flour. This small but essential ingredient balances the sweetness, brings out the flavor of the cookies. Here's a tip. If you want to ensure your cookies hold their shape even better, try adding 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. Cornstarch helps prevent spreading during baking, giving you sharp, clean edges on your cutout cookies. It also adds a slightly softer texture to the dough, making the cookies extra tender without compromising their structure. Whisk or sift everything together to ensure it's well combined and evenly distributed. Once everything is thoroughly mixed, I set the bowl aside, ready for the next step. In a separate bowl, I crack 1 large egg. Large eggs are ideal for this recipe, as they provide just the right amount of structure to hold the dough together without making it too dry or sticky. Next, I add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract to the egg. Vanilla is the star of sugar cookie flavors. It brings a warm, cozy sweetness that ties all the ingredients together and makes the cookies taste timeless and irresistible. I grab my whisk and blend the egg and vanilla together until the mixture is smooth and fully combined. This step is quick but important to ensure that the egg is evenly distributed throughout the dough later on. Whisking also helps create a silky texture that makes mixing into the butter and sugar effortless. Once everything is well mixed, I set this bowl aside, keeping it ready to join the party in the mixing bowl soon. Now it's time to bring out the big guns. My KitchenAid mixer. This trusty helper is an absolute lifesaver, especially for recipes like this, where the dough is thick and needs to be perfectly blended. I start by adding 1 cup of softened unsalted butter to the mixing bowl. Softened butter is key here. It's been sitting at room temperature just long enough to blend easily and create that light, fluffy texture we're aiming for. By the way, if your butter isn't quite at room temperature yet, check out my blog post on how to soften butter quickly. It's packed with easy tips to save time and get that perfect, creamy consistency for mixing. Next, I add 2/3 cup of granulated sugar. Sugar not only sweetens the cookies, but also works with the butter to build a delicate, tender structure. At this point, the bowl is ready to go, and so is my paddle attachment. I set the mixer to low speed at first, because, let's be honest, no one wants your sugar explosion flying all over the kitchen. Once everything starts to combine, I gradually increase the speed to medium. Then I let the butter and sugar cream together for about 2 to 3 minutes. This step is magic. It transforms the mixture into something light, airy, and pale in color, setting the stage for cookies that melt in your mouth. looking for healthier alternatives to some of the ingredients in this recipe, I've got you covered. On my blog, I've included a list of substitutions to make these cutout cookies a bit lighter while keeping them just as delicious. Whether you want to reduce sugar, try whole wheat flour, or adjust the butter, you'll find all those options detailed in my post. It's a great way to customize the cookies to fit your dietary needs or preferences. Check out the full recipe and the healthier substitutions on my blog. The link is in the description below. After creaming the butter and sugar, I grab my trusty silicone spatula and scrape down the sides of the bowl. This ensures no sneaky bits of butter or sugar are hanging out unblended in the corners. It's a small step, but it makes a big difference in the final texture of the dough. Now it's time to add the wet ingredients. I pour in the egg and vanilla mixture that I whisked earlier. Back to medium speed on the mixer it goes, and I let everything blend until it's smooth and fully incorporated. By now the batter smells so good, it's hard not to grab a spoonful for quality control. But patience. The cookies will be worth it. I hope you're loving the process of making these chocolate-dipped peppermint cutout sugar cookies as much as I am. If you're enjoying this recipe, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you'll never miss any of my festive baking fun. Do you have a favorite holiday cookie recipe that's a must-bake in your family? Maybe a special tradition or a unique flavor combo you've tried over the years? I'd love for you to share it with me in the comments below. Let's swap ideas and spread some holiday cheer together. Here on my channel, I love blending food photography and baking, inviting you into my kitchen to celebrate the joy of creating something both beautiful and delicious. From perfecting cookie decorations to sharing recipes that bring people together, I hope you feel inspired to whip up some holiday magic too. Thanks for joining me on this sweet adventure. Let's keep those cookies coming and make this season even more delicious. Now it's time to bring in the dry ingredients, and this is where the dough really starts to come together. I add the dry mixture gradually, about a third at a time, while keeping the mixer on low speed. This avoids the dreaded flour explosion. I've had enough snowstorms in my kitchen and ensures everything blends smoothly. As the dough thickens, here's my go-to tip. If it feels too sticky, add a tablespoon of flour at a time until it's firm but pliable. If it's too dry or crumbly, a small splash of milk will fix it right up. The dough should feel like soft clay, smooth, pliable, and ready to roll. A quick pinch test will tell you it's perfect if it holds together without cracking or sticking. Once it's just right, I stop the mixer and scrape down the paddle attachment with a silicone spatula because no dough goes to waste here. A quick check at the bottom of the bowl ensures no sneaky flour is left behind, and I fold it in by hand if needed. These little steps make all the difference when it's time to roll and cut your cookies. Next, I carefully divide the dough into 2 equal portions. A little precision here saves me from having one massive disc and one tiny one later. Using a silicone spatula, I scoop each portion onto a piece of food wrap. Here's my personal trick. I loosely wrap the dough first, then press it into a flat disc. This keeps my hands clean and avoids the sticky mess of handling the dough directly. Plus, shaping the dough into discs now saves so much time when it's time to roll out. Once the discs are neatly wrapped, I pop them into the refrigerator to chill for at least an hour. Trust me, this step is non-negotiable. Chilling the dough firms it up, making it easier to roll out, and ensuring your cookies hold their crisp, clean edges during baking. Skipping this step has resulted in some shapeless blobs in my oven more times than I'd like to admit. If you're not baking right away, say, prepping ahead for the holidays, these dough discs freeze beautifully for up to 3 months. Just wrap them in an extra layer of plastic wrap or foil to prevent freezer burn. My pro tip: always label your discs with the date and sugar cookie dough. using a Sharpie. There's nothing worse than pulling out a mystery dough and playing the guessing game mid-holiday rush. When you're ready to bake, simply thaw the discs in the fridge overnight, and they'll be as good as fresh. Did you know sugar cookies have a history that goes all the way back to 7th century Persia? That's where sugar was first cultivated, and bakers started creating sweet treats using simple ingredients like sugar, flour, and butter or oil. From there, the idea of cookies spread to Europe, where they evolved into recipes like English shortbread in the 16th century. But the sugar cookies we know today really started with German settlers in Pennsylvania during the 1700s. They created the Nazareth sugar cookie, a buttery, crumbly treat that became a symbol of hospitality. Fast forward to the 20th century, and sugar cookies had become the go-to holiday cookie in the US. Their dough is so easy to work with. You can roll it out, cut it into shapes, and decorate them however you like, which is why they're a favorite for Christmas and other celebrations. Personally, I love baking sugar cookies for every holiday we celebrate. Whether it's Valentine's Day, Easter, or even my daughter's birthday party, these cookies always make an appearance. For her birthday, I like to include sugar cookies decorated with royal icing in the goodie bags. They're always a big hit. It's such a fun way to customize a celebration and share something homemade with friends and family. And here's a fun fact. In 2001, Pennsylvania made the sugar cookie its official state cookie, honoring its deep roots in American baking traditions. Today, sugar cookies remain a classic, whether plain, decorated, or customized with sprinkles or icing. I like to start my holiday baking prep early, usually in September. It's a system I've perfected over the years to keep things stress-free during the busy holiday season. First, I make the dough and freeze it in neat labeled discs. This sugar cookie dough fits perfectly into that process. After dividing and wrapping it into discs, I either refrigerate it for baking later in the week or freeze it if I'm planning ahead for the holidays. Each disc is carefully labeled with the date and sugar cookie dough using a trusty Sharpie so there's no confusion when I'm juggling batches of gingerbread dough and other holiday treats. By October or November, I'm in full baking mode, pulling out discs of dough as needed and baking cookies in big batches. If I'm not decorating them right away, I freeze the baked cookies to keep them fresh. Finally, December is all about decorating and packaging. That's when the magic happens, turning these cookies into festive gifts for family and friends. Chilling the dough is an essential step in my process. It firms up the dough, making it easier to roll and cut into shapes that hold beautifully in the oven. I divide the dough into 2 portions. Scoop each onto a piece of food wrap with a silicone spatula. Loosely wrap it and press it into a flat disc. This keeps my hands clean and makes rolling a breeze later on. If I'm freezing the discs, they'll stay fresh for up to 3 months, ready to be thawed overnight in the fridge whenever inspiration or holiday prep strikes. Starting early takes the pressure off and lets me truly enjoy the holiday season. Seeing neatly stacked discs of dough and trays of cookies in my freezer is so satisfying. It's like having my own little baking headquarters ready to go at any time. Whether you're a planner like me or prefer last-minute baking, this recipe is a must for any holiday lineup. Trust me, it's worth the prep. After the dough has chilled, I take one disc out of the refrigerator. Here's a personal tip from me. When you're ready to roll out your chilled dough, let the disc sit on the counter for about 10 minutes before diving in. Straight out of the fridge, the dough can feel like a hockey puck, thanks to all that butter. Giving it a little time to soften saves you from a serious arm workout and keeps your rolling pin and your sanity intact. Trust me, your wrists will thank you. Before diving into rolling out your dough and cutting out cookies, it's time to gather your trusty tools. Don't worry if you don't have the exact ones I mentioned. There's always a simpler alternative hiding in your kitchen. First up are cookie cutters, the stars of the show. Fancy cutters make perfectly shaped cookies, but if you don't have any, a drinking glass or an empty can works wonders for simple, round shapes. Feeling creative? Grab a knife and freehand some designs, but maybe don't expect a cookie masterpiece on your first try. Next, a cake spatula is your best friend for carefully lifting cut cookies and transferring them to the baking sheet without stretching or tearing them. If you don't have one, a pancake spatula works just as well, or even a wide knife will do the trick. Just go slow and steady. This is cookie making, not a race. To get perfectly even dough every time, an adjustable rolling pin with thickness rings is ideal. No adjustable pin. No worries. A wine bottle, preferably empty, or a traditional rolling pin works just fine. Just keep an eye on the thickness of your dough and try to keep it consistent. For sticky dough situations, disposable vinyl gloves come in handy to keep your hands clean and the dough mess-free. If you don't have gloves, lightly flour your hands, but fair warning. Flour-covered hands usually mean flour-covered everything else. When it's time to bake, you'll need a baking sheet lined with parchment paper to keep your cookies from sticking. If parchment isn't an option, a silicone baking mat works beautifully. In a pinch, you can grease your baking sheet, but be prepared for crispier cookie bottoms. Finally, my favorite little helper, a dredge shaker filled with all-purpose flour for dusting the rolling surface evenly. No dredge shaker? A sifter, fine mesh strainer, or even a light sprinkle by hand will work too. It might just get a little messy, but hey, isn't that part of the fun? Once you've got your tools ready, you're set to start rolling and cutting. And if you end up with flour all over your kitchen, like I always do, just remind yourself that the best cookies come from a little bit of chaos. On a lightly floured surface, I roll the dough out to about 1/4 inch thickness. Keeping the dough evenly rolled is essential so all the cookies bake at the same rate. Uneven thickness can lead to some cookies being underbaked while others burn, so I take my time with this step. I also like to group cookies of the same size on one baking sheet to ensure they bake evenly. No tiny cookies over baking while waiting for the larger ones to catch up. Then comes the fun part, cutting out shapes. I press my favorite cutters into the dough to create festive designs, making sure to use up every bit of space before gathering the scraps to re-roll. Once all the shapes are cut, I carefully transfer them to a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. I place each cookie with care, leaving enough room between them for slight expansion during baking. By the end of this process, the baking sheet is filled with perfectly shaped cookies, ready for the oven. It's a satisfying moment to see all those neatly arranged designs waiting to bake, knowing they'll soon turn into delicious treats. Here's a tip from me. When lifting cut-out cookies from the surface, always remove the excess dough around the shapes first before lifting the cookies themselves. This makes it much easier to slide your spatula or hands underneath the cookies without stretching or distorting their shapes. If you try to lift the cookies with the extra dough still in place, they're more likely to stick or lose their clean edges. Removing the extra dough first gives you a clean surface and ensures your cookies stay picture perfect. When I'm done cutting out cookies, I never let the scraps go to waste. I gather them up in my hands, mash them back together into a disc, roll them out again, and cut more cookies. I keep repeating this process until I've cut every possible shape from the dough. It's a bit like a game. How many cookies can I squeeze out of one batch? When I get down to the last tiny scraps that just can't make another cookie, I wrap them in food wrap and set them aside. This keeps them from drying out while I grab a next fresh dough disc from the fridge. After cutting out cookies from the new disc, I combine the scraps from both rounds, mash them together, roll them out, and keep going. Waste not, want not, right? Here's a tip I've learned the hard way. If the dough starts sticking to your rolling pin and you feel like you're wrestling with it, lightly flour the pin. It makes everything glide smoothly and keeps the dough from turning into a sticky mass. Plus, it saves you from wanting to throw the rolling pin across the kitchen. Don't ask how I know. With this method, you'll get the most out of your dough and have plenty of perfectly shaped cookies ready to bake. Before baking, I always chill the cutout cookies on the baking sheet for another 10 minutes. This quick step is especially helpful if your kitchen is warm. It firms up the dough again, so the cookies hold their clean edges while baking. Trust me, it's worth the wait to avoid your carefully cut stars or gingerbread people turning into something that resembles abstract art in the oven. Once chilled, I bake the cookies in a preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 8 to 10 minutes. I keep an eye on them to make sure the edges turn lightly golden while the centers stay soft. The centers might look slightly underdone when you take them out, but don't panic. They'll firm up as they cool. If you don't have a wire rack for cooling, no worries. Just leave the cookies on the baking sheet until they're fully cooled. It's not fancy, but it works, and you won't risk accidentally cracking a cookie during the transfer. Here's a tip I've learned through plenty of trial and error. I always bake my first tray at the lower temperature mentioned in the recipe. This gives me a chance to check on the cookies and adjust the time or temperature for the next batches if needed. Baking at high altitude comes with its own quirks, so I've had to figure out what works best for me. Plus, every oven has its own personality. What bakes beautifully in one might come out a little too crispy in another. Let's just say I've had a few learning experiences along the way. Once baked and cooled, you'll have cookies with crisp edges, soft centers, and that perfect homemade touch. And hey, if a few cookies look less than perfect, just call them unique and eat them before anyone else notices. That's the baker's privilege, right? All right, let's get real. Before we can start decorating, these cookies need to cool completely. Seriously, don't skip this step, or you'll have a chocolate sliding mess on your hands. Now, let me confess something. I am not one of those super ambitious bakers who powers through everything in one day. Nope, not me. I like to stretch this process over a few days, sometimes even weeks. I just pop the cookies or dough in the freezer between steps to keep them fresh. If that sounds like a lot, don't worry. That's a whole other video I'll save for later. Oh, and if you're not feeling the whole bake from scratch vibe, no judgment here. Just swing by your local bakery and grab some sugar cookies. Any shape works. You've got this. Let's move on to the fun part. Now let me tell you about my candy melting pot. This thing is my ride or die kitchen gadget. If I had to pick one tool to take on a desert island, a desert island with electricity and chocolate supplies, it'd be this. But if you don't have one, don't stress. I've got a whole other video showing you how to melt chocolate like a pro. No fancy tools required. Here's what I do. First, I toss 2 cups of semi-sweet chocolate chips into the pot. Then I add 2 tablespoons of coconut oil to help smooth out the texture. I turn the pot on high and stir with my trusty silicone spatula until it's smooth and syrupy. Make sure all the chocolate chips are fully melted and the consistency is perfectly pourable, almost like a rich chocolate syrup. If it looks like it's throwing a tantrum and getting thick or lumpy, just add a half teaspoon of coconut oil at a time. Stir thoroughly after each addition until the chocolate smooths out. Stir, stir, stir. You've got this. Smooth chocolate is the goal here. Okay, time to set the stage. If you've ever decorated cookies before, you know this is not the moment to be running around looking for tools or ingredients. Chocolate waits for no one. I lay out a pre-cut sheet of parchment paper on the counter to keep things clean and organized. I love using pre-cut parchment sheets because they save me time. No measuring, no cutting, and no dealing with that annoying parchment paper roll that never stays flat. Plus, it's always the perfect size and it's ready to go when I need it. Honestly, they've been a game changer in my kitchen. I've tried a lot of options over the years, but parchment paper is my favorite. It's non-stick, easy to clean up, and helps me keep my kitchen counters from turning into a chocolate-covered disaster zone. Plus, it's super versatile. I use it for baking, decorating, and even wrapping up treats. Seriously, it's like the superhero of my kitchen supplies. Pro tip, if you're in a rush, line a baking sheet with parchment paper and decorate there. Then you can pop the whole tray in the fridge for 5 to 10 minutes to set the chocolate. It's a lifesaver for single batches. Me? I've got a double batch going today because I have a lot of cookie boxes to gift this Christmas. Seriously, my list of people to surprise with cookies has gotten out of hand this year. I've got friends, family, neighbors, and maybe even the mail carrier covered. So, yes, I need all the counter space I can possibly get. And honestly, I blame my daughter for this because she has been telling everyone in town how amazing my cookies are. Now I've got a reputation to uphold. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Time to get these cookies dressed up. I dip half of each cookie into the melted chocolate, letting the extra drip off. Seriously, let it drip. Otherwise, you'll have puddles. Then, I place them on the parchment paper, making sure to leave enough space between the cookies so they don't stick together as the chocolate sets. I love how the chocolate adds a glossy, irresistible touch to each cookie, instantly making them look fancy enough for gifting or showing off at a party. My rule: never work with more than 3 cookies at a time. This chocolate sets faster than my morning coffee kicks in. Before the chocolate hardens, I grab my little spoon and sprinkle on some crushed candy canes. Don't have crushed candy canes? No problem. I've got another video where I show you how to crush them like a boss. And don't worry if it gets messy. Peppermint crumbs everywhere just means it's the holidays, right? For double batches, like mine, you'll need about 30 to 60 minutes for the chocolate to fully harden. Room temperature, humidity, it all plays a part. Just be patient and let the chocolate work its magic. If you try to rush it, you'll end up with smudges and fingerprints, and we don't want that. This is the perfect time to tidy up your workspace or sip on some hot cocoa while you wait. Trust me, the results are worth the wait. You'll have glossy, beautifully set chocolate that makes every cookie look like it came straight from a bakery. I always place my chocolate-dipped cookies in separate self-sealable bags because chocolate is heat-sensitive, and I don't want them sticking to other cookies in the box. It also makes them easier to store and keeps them looking perfect for gifting. Plus, my daughter loves taking a basket full of cookies to share with her friends at the ice rink, and this way, they're individually packed and ready to go. It's also a great way to keep the cookies clean and safe from people touching them. Because let's face it, nobody wants random fingerprints on their holiday treats. Individual packaging keeps everything neat and hygienic, which is especially important when sharing treats with a crowd. Once the chocolate is nice and firm, I slide each cookie into a self-sealable bag. Not only does this keep them fresh, but it also makes them perfect for gifting. These bags are so convenient, especially when you're preparing a bunch of gifts. I stack them neatly into a big holiday-themed box, adding a layer of tissue paper for a festive touch, and it instantly feels like a professional gift set. Or, for sneaking one or two when no one's looking. I won't tell if you don't. If you want to take your decorating a step further, you can dress up your cookies with crushed nuts or finely chopped dried berries. They add a touch of elegance, a pop of color, and a bit of texture that everyone will love. These cookies have quickly become my go-to holiday treat, and honestly, seeing the smiles when people open their cookie boxes makes all the effort worth it. And there you go. Chocolate-dipped peppermint cut-out sugar cookies ready to impress your friends, delight your family, or just make you feel like a holiday hero. If you're curious about how to package these cookies beautifully and on a budget, check out my next video. I'll guide you through creative and affordable ways to present your cookie gifts and add a personal touch. Whether it's a festive ribbon, a handwritten note, or a layer of colorful tissue paper. These little extras make all the difference and truly elevate your gifts. You'll love how simple it is to make your cookie boxes look stunning without spending a fortune. Cheers to sweet success, and I will see you in the next video.